I still remember the first time I saw him again, not as the awkward boy I knew back then, but as a man. A man I shouldn't have looked at the way I did. And yet I did. I think that moment was the beginning of everything unraveling. Or maybe, if I'm honest, things had started unraveling long before, quietly, imperceptibly, like a thread pulling loose in a favorite sweater, until one day it just gives. I'm 54 now. My name is Diane. I've been married to Walter for 31 years. We have two grown daughters, a house just outside of Charleston, and the kind of marriage people mistake for stable simply because it's still standing. We host Thanksgiving, pay off credit cards, nod through sermons. We don't argue, but we don't touch much anymore either. Walter loves me, I know he does, in the quiet, dutiful way men of his generation do. But it's been years since he looked at me like he wanted to know what I was thinking, let alone what I was feeling under my skin. And then came Aaron. Technically, Aaron is my stepbrother, though that's always sounded weirder than it is. My mother remarried late in life. She was 60 when she married Aaron's father, who was already past 70. Aaron and I only met a handful of times in our adult lives, mostly at holidays or scattered family functions. I was already married with kids by then. He was in and out of different jobs, never staying in one place long. He was one of those people who seemed to have wandered through life with a backpack and a grin, always halfway packed for the next thing. I never paid much attention. Until last summer. My mother passed that May. It wasn't sudden, but it still gutted me. I didn't cry at the funeral. I was too busy organizing flowers, managing casseroles, accepting condolences with tight smiles. But I fell apart in other ways. Quietly, privately. I started spending more time in the garden, staying up too late with old photo albums, pouring a little too much Pinot Noir after Walter went to bed. Aaron came to the funeral, of course. And stayed. His father had passed years ago, and he'd been living out west, Oregon or Washington, I forget which, but he decided to hang around Charleston for a while to help with the house. The house, meaning my mother's house, which she left jointly to both of us in her will. I didn't have the heart to argue. There was something comforting about not being alone in that space, even if he did take over the guest room and leave beard trimmings in the sink. We were polite for the first week. Casual. He offered to repaint the porch, fix the leaky faucet, change the locks. He was always shirtless by noon, said it was too hot for anything else. And I told myself that the way I looked at him wasn't what it was. That it was just heat and grief and misplaced nostalgia. But the truth was harder. The truth was I noticed him. His body. His smile. The way he looked at me like I wasn't invisible. Like I wasn't just someone's wife or mother or neighbor or hostess. One night, about 2 weeks after the funeral, I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet without the creak of my mother's footsteps down the hall. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot in a silk nightgown I'd forgotten I owned. Aaron was already there, drinking bourbon at the table in nothing but sweatpants. We both laughed nervously, like teenagers caught sneaking out. "You couldn't sleep either?" I asked. He shook his head, sipping. "Too many ghosts in this place." I nodded and poured myself a glass, sitting across from him. For a while we just talked. About Mom. About his dad. About nothing. But the conversation drifted, as conversations sometimes do when two people are sitting in dim light with too much time and too little inhibition. "I never figured you'd be so elegant," he said at one point, eyes fixed on mine. "Elegant?" I laughed. He shrugged. "You're beautiful, Diane. Always were. But now, I don't know. You glow." I felt the compliment settle in my chest like a warm flush. No one had called me beautiful in a long time. Walter hadn't said it in over a decade, not without prompting anyway. "I'm not sure that's true," I said, deflecting. "It is. I see you," he said simply. "I always have." That was the moment. The moment everything cracked open. He reached across the table and brushed his fingers along my wrist. Light. Tentative. But it sent a ripple through me I hadn't felt since I was 20. My heart stuttered. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded him we were family. I should have thought of Walter. But I didn't. Instead, I held his gaze and let his hand stay there. We didn't kiss that night. Not then. But something had shifted, and we both knew it. The next few days were charged with a strange, intoxicating tension. I'd catch him watching me as I bent over to pull weeds or as I adjusted the strap of my sundress. Once, our fingers touched as I handed him a coffee mug, and I felt it everywhere, low in my belly, along my thighs, behind my knees. I started caring more about how I looked. I wore lipstick again, shaved my legs, dug out lingerie I'd tucked away in the back of my drawer. Walter didn't notice, he never did. One afternoon, after we finished boxing up the attic, Aaron came up behind me in the kitchen while I was rinsing sweat from my neck with a damp towel. His hand was on my shoulder before I could speak, his breath warm against my ear. "You don't have to keep pretending," he whispered. "Pretending what?" "That you don't want me." I turned to face him, and for a second, the world stopped. His mouth was on mine before I could think, hard and soft at the same time, like he'd been waiting years. I let him kiss me. I kissed him back. My arms went around his neck without hesitation, his hands sliding under the hem of my dress. I was trembling, not from fear, but from hunger, from the ache of being seen and wanted and touched. We didn't make it to the bedroom. He lifted me onto the kitchen counter, dress bunched around my hips, panties pushed aside. It was desperate and unplanned, and everything I hadn't known I needed. I remember gripping the edge of the counter as he moved inside me, his mouth pressed to my neck, whispering my name like a secret. I should have felt shame. I should have felt panic. I felt alive. Afterward, we said nothing. He kissed my shoulder, helped me down, and we cleaned up in silence. I half expected him to apologize. I half expected myself to cry. But instead, I made us eggs and toast, and we ate in our underwear like nothing had happened, like everything had changed. It wasn't the only time. I told myself it would just be once, a slip, a moment of grief-fueled weakness. But once you let someone into that part of you, it doesn't close easily. Not when it's been hungry for so long. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside the window and the unfamiliar warmth of anticipation in my chest. It wasn't like the giddy thrill of young love. It was deeper, more dangerous. A knowing kind of hunger. My body ached in the most delicious way, and when I looked in a mirror, there was a flush to my cheeks I hadn't seen in years. Walter had called late the night before, asking if I needed him to drive over from Charleston. I told him no, of course. That I was fine. That Aaron was helping. I heard the relief in his voice. Not because he didn't want to be there, but because he was so used to me taking care of everything. Grief, houses, emotions. He trusted me to handle it all without complaint. And that's what I'd done. For 3 decades. Until now. Aaron and I didn't talk about what had happened. We didn't need to. There was something effortless about the rhythm we fell into. We moved around the house like magnets, always aware of each other, always drawn. He would brush past me in the hallway, hand lingering on my lower back. I'd catch him watching me from the porch steps, his gaze heavy and unashamed. It was like we were living in a bubble just outside reality, and I wasn't ready to let it pop. The next time we slept together, it was slower, more deliberate. It was late. A thunderstorm rolled in after dinner, fat drops of rain smacking the windows as the sky darkened. The power flickered out just after 9. I lit candles, and we played old records on Mom's battery-powered turntable. He poured wine. I curled up in an armchair in one of my silk slips, pale green, with lace at the neckline, the kind of thing Walter would have walked past 100 times without blinking. But Aaron noticed. He sat across from me, eyes tracking every inch of skin exposed by the flickering candlelight. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched. The silence stretched between us like a current. And then he stood up, walked to me, kneeled at my feet. He ran his fingers along the hem of the slip, up the inside of my thigh. I spread my legs without thinking. The storm outside grew louder, and inside that room, so did my breathing. He pulled me forward, cradling the back of my head as he kissed me. His mouth was softer than before, his tongue slower. It wasn't desperate this time, it was worship. He peeled the slip off me like it was something sacred, kissed each inch of skin he revealed. I lay back in the chair as he tasted me, his mouth, his hands, the sound of rain mixing with my moans. He made me come like that, slow, deep waves that left me gasping and arching into him. After, he lifted me in his arms, carried me to the bedroom, and laid me down like something precious. We made love again, over and over, until my body hummed with satisfaction I didn't know I could still feel. In the morning, I woke tangled in his arms. And for the first time in years, I didn't wake with guilt or a to-do list in my mind. I just lay there, eyes closed, breathing him in. His skin, his warmth, the feel of another body that wanted mine, not out of routine, but out of pure need. And still, I didn't tell Walter. It's funny how easy it becomes to lie when the truth feels like a betrayal to yourself. I told him we were still cleaning the house, sorting paperwork. I told him Aaron had offered to drive things to the donation center. I even sent pictures of the boxes, neat, labeled, convincing. The truth? We were barely touching the house anymore. We spent most afternoons in bed, or in the hammock under the oak tree, talking for hours between kisses. Aaron made me laugh, that deep, breathless kind of laughter that shakes something loose inside. He asked about my dreams, about the things I missed, about my body, like it was a new country he wanted to memorize. One afternoon, he traced a scar on my abdomen from a C-section decades ago and said, "Even this is beautiful. It's part of your story." Walter never touched that scar. It was around then that things started to shift. The spell was still there, but real life started creeping back in. My daughters called, asking when I'd be home. Walter gently reminded me about our anniversary coming up, 32 years. He wanted to plan something simple. A beach weekend, maybe. Just the two of us. And I said yes. Because what else could I say? The day I left the house, our house, my mother's house, I didn't cry. But Aaron did. Quietly, without words. He held me by the door, face buried in my neck, breathing me in like he was trying to memorize the way I smelled. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said. "I just want you to know what we have, it's not pretend." "I know," I whispered. And I did. That night, I slept beside Walter in our king-size bed, his breathing steady and familiar. He reached for my hand in the dark, squeezed it gently, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, Aaron's face burned behind my eyelids. I told myself it was over, that it had to be, but it wasn't. A week later, I started texting Aaron again. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. A photo of a book he'd left behind. A question about a bill. Then came late-night messages. Flirty ones. Explicit ones. He sent me a picture of himself one evening, shirtless, towel around his waist, fresh from the shower. I sat in my bathroom with the door locked, legs shaking as I touched myself to the memory of his hands. He told me he thought about me every night, that no one else would ever know me like he did, that he wanted to taste me again. Everywhere. And God help me, I wrote him back. I wrote things I'd never dared say aloud. Things Walter had never heard from my lips. I told Aaron what I wore under my clothes. I described what I wanted him to do to me. I sent pictures. Not crude ones, but intimate, lace barely covering nipples, my hand between my thighs. The kind of photos I never imagined myself taking at 54. And Aaron loved them. He responded with words that made my body thrum, slow, teasing, filthy. And tender always. "I miss your taste. I dream about you on top of me. I want you again, and again, and again." I told myself I wasn't really cheating anymore, that it was just texts, just memories. But I knew better. The truth was I was already gone. A part of me, at least. The part that wanted to be wanted. The part that refused to die quietly in a house filled with routine. The part that ached for heat and laughter and connections so raw it made me tremble. Aaron had awakened something in me I hadn't realized I'd buried. Not just desire, but aliveness. And once it woke up, it refused to go back to sleep. So when he called and said, "Come see me, just once more," I didn't say no. I booked a weekend retreat at a wellness inn 2 towns over. Told Walter I needed some space, grief, memory, whatever excuse sounded noble. He kissed my cheek, trusting. I packed lingerie and red wine. And I drove to Aaron. He was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his truck like a scene from a movie I wasn't supposed to be starring in. And when I got out of the car, he walked straight to me and kissed me like he hadn't breathed in days. We didn't make it to the inn. We barely made it to the truck. He bent me over the back seat, pulled up my dress, and whispered, "You're mine, Diane. You've always been mine." And I let him take me, raw, desperate, moaning his name into the leather seats. Afterward, we lay tangled together, sticky with sweat and desire, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just sex anymore. This was a choice. I wish I could say I left that weekend with clarity, that in Aaron's arms, I found a truth sharp enough to cut through all the noise and tell me who I was, what I wanted, and where I belonged. But clarity was not what I brought back. What I brought back was a deeper hunger, a kind of craving that didn't fade when I kissed Walter goodnight, or when I folded his shirts into neat, predictable stacks. It lingered in the corners of my days, in the scent of Aaron's shampoo still buried in my skin, in the bruise on my inner thigh from where his mouth had gripped too tightly, in the flash of memory every time I caught my own reflection in the mirror. I tried to return to routine. I volunteered at church. I hosted bridge night. I baked lemon bars and complimented my neighbors on their azaleas. And yet, something in me had cracked open. And no matter how carefully I smoothed over the surface, the crack remained. Aaron texted me every night. Sometimes it was simple, "Miss you." Other times it was explicit, graphic, wicked. He knew just how to phrase things, not crude, never juvenile, but adult, erotic, specific. The way he described my body, the way he remembered every moan, every twitch, every breath. It made my skin flush in public places. I once had to excuse myself from the produce aisle because he'd written, "I dreamt of peeling your panties off like the skin of a ripe peach, tasting you until your knees buckled." And I couldn't stop myself from replying. I told myself it was fantasy. Safe. That I was still in control. But fantasy has a way of becoming habit, and habit eventually becomes life. Walter and I celebrated our anniversary quietly. He took me to a seafood place down by the marina. He even wore the blue shirt I liked, the one that made his shoulders look broader than they were. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. 32 years, he said. Hard to believe. I smiled and nodded, but I couldn't meet his eyes. When we got home, he lit candles in the bedroom, made an effort, in the way men do when they sense something is slipping but don't know where to begin. He undressed me gently, like he was afraid of startling me. His hands were careful, respectful, familiar. And all I could think was, Aaron doesn't ask permission. He just knows what I need. I faked an orgasm that night, the first in years. And the guilt of it clung to me like a film I couldn't scrub off. In the weeks that followed, I found myself inventing reasons to be alone. I took weekend wellness drives. I visited my cousin in Colombia. I started a watercolor class that didn't exist. And every time, I found my way back to Aaron, to his motel room, or his rental apartment, or the back seat of his truck under a canopy of trees. And each time it was different. Once, we did it in the shower, water scalding, his hands pinning me to the tile. Another time, he blindfolded me, fed me chocolate with his fingers before trailing kisses down my belly. One afternoon, he took me on the kitchen table, my legs over his shoulders, wine still open and untouched as he made me tremble so hard I wept. But it wasn't just the sex. It was the way he listened, the way he remembered things I hadn't said out loud in years. The way he said, "You are not invisible. You are not done." And I believed him. For the first time in decades, I felt like a woman, not a wife, not a mother, not a role. A woman with wants, with nerve endings, with a laugh that echoed through rooms when someone touched her just right. But living a double life requires precision. And secrets, like weeds, always find cracks in the foundation. It started small. Walter noticed I wasn't eating as much, that I'd lost weight. that I checked my phone more than usual. He didn't accuse, not at first. Just watched. Our daughter Abby visited one weekend. She hugged me in the kitchen and said, "You look different." Different how? She tilted her head. Just, I don't know. Softer. Happier. You're glowing. Did you get a facial? I laughed too loud. Just good moisturizer. But I saw the question in her eyes. The one she didn't ask. I told myself it was harmless. That I wasn't breaking anything. That marriages endure worse. But something in me was shifting again. Aaron was starting to say things he hadn't said before. He spoke of futures. Of plans. Of leaving Charleston. Of taking me with him. "We could start fresh," he said once, curled behind me in bed, his hand tracing slow circles on my hip. "Somewhere coastal. A little cottage. Art. Books. Just us." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. Or maybe I did. I wanted both. The comfort of Walter. The fire of Aaron. The life I built, and the life I could have had. One night, as I stood brushing my teeth, Walter came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and rested his chin on my shoulder. "You seem far away lately," he said quietly. I froze. "Wachstuf, Elite." "Just stress. Still sorting out Mom's estate." He nodded, but his arms didn't tighten. That was when I realized something bone deep. Walter was afraid to push. He sensed the distance, but didn't want to name it. And I, coward that I was, let him live in the silence. But silence has a sound. It grew between us like fog, thick and humid, and impossible to ignore. We stopped watching TV together. Our dinners were quieter. We slept back to back more often than not. And still, I texted Aaron. Still, I snuck away. One weekend, he surprised me, booked us a little cottage by the water just outside Beaufort. It was rustic and perfect. White sheets, open windows, cicadas humming outside. That weekend was a dream. We cooked together, danced barefoot in the living room, made love on every surface. He brought out a part of me I didn't know I had, playful, radiant, almost girlish. On the last morning, he stood at the kitchen counter making eggs, bare-chested, sun spilling across his back. And something about that moment made my throat close. I wanted to stay. I wanted to freeze time. But when I looked at my phone, I saw 3 missed calls from Walter. And a text. "Let me know you're okay. Getting worried." My chest tightened. I walked outside, sat on the porch, and stared out at the marsh. When Aaron came out behind me, he didn't speak. He just stood there, watching me. "You can't keep doing this forever," he said finally. "I know. You love him. I care for him. He's been my life for so long." "And me?" I looked up at him, sun behind his head, bare feet on the wooden planks, heart in his eyes. "You make me feel alive," I said. "You make me feel like I matter." He nodded. "That's not love. I don't know what love is anymore." And neither of us said anything else. I drove home in silence, my stomach twisted into knots. I found Walter in the living room, reading, glasses low on his nose. He looked up when I walked in. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." He nodded, then turned the page.
Just like that.
No questions.
No accusations.
And that hurt more than anything else. Because in that moment, I realized something I couldn't ignore. Walter didn't want the truth.
And I didn't want to give it to him.
But secrets never stay buried. Not forever. Not when the body remembers. Not when the heart keeps pulling in 2 directions. And not when one of those directions starts asking for more than stolen weekends and secret messages. Autumn came slowly that year. The mornings turned crisp, the air sharp with the scent of wet leaves and chimney smoke. Everything outside looked the same, porches with pumpkins, dogs being walked at twilight, neighbors waving with coffee in hand. But inside me, the world had changed. I was split in 2. Half of me moved through my life like normal. Breakfast with Walter, laundry folded neatly into drawers, book club meetings where I smiled and nodded and offered thoughtful opinions about novels I wasn't really reading. The other half lived in a different timeline altogether, one that ignited every time Aaron texted or called, or sent a picture of the empty side of his bed with the caption, "Still yours." I kept telling myself it had to end, that I couldn't keep lying. But I didn't end it. And eventually, I didn't even pretend I would. I became meticulous with my stories, careful with receipts, selective with replies, always 2 steps ahead of suspicion. It frightened me sometimes, how easily I adapted, how quickly deceit became its own strange form of comfort. I knew every angle of my new double life. I had memorized the choreography of it. And yet I hated myself for it. Not for the sex, not even for the love, but for the way I started to resent the part of me that had once been so loyal, so reliable, so good. Walter didn't suspect anything. Or maybe he did, and simply chose not to look too closely. After 32 years together, you either learn to trust blindly or pretend not to see. Then came Thanksgiving. It was the first time Aaron and Walter would be in the same house since the funeral. Abby and her family were flying in. My younger daughter, Jenna, had offered a host, but Walter insisted we have it at home. Like always. I didn't argue. I couldn't afford to draw attention. I spent days preparing cranberry sauce, roasted carrots, the turkey dry-brined exactly the way Walter liked. I even polished the silver, something I hadn't done in years. When Aaron arrived, he brought a bottle of wine and a pumpkin pie he clearly hadn't baked. I met him at the door, and for one terrifying, electric second, our eyes locked. His gaze dropped down my body just for a flash, and I felt it like a touch. A silent reminder of everything we'd done, everything we still were. But then Walter appeared behind me, grinning.
He, man. Kom in.
Glad you could make it. Aaron smiled back, easy and charming. Wouldn't miss it. He hugged Walter. He shook hands with my daughters. He sat across from me at the dinner table, passing bowls and laughing at stories. And I sat there, cutting bites of turkey, nodding, sipping wine, heart pounding the entire time. I could feel his leg brush mine beneath the table. Just once. Just enough to make my breath hitch. He didn't say anything inappropriate.
Didn't touch me again.
But that was almost worse. Because he didn't have to. He knew me now. Knew my tells. The way my eyes dilated when I was aroused. The way I shifted in my seat when my body remembered his.
And I did.
I remembered everything. That night, after everyone had left and Walter was upstairs watching football, I stepped outside to take the trash out, or so I said. Aaron followed. He stood by the edge of the porch, arms folded, watching the sky. "You looked beautiful tonight," he said. Aaron. I wasn't going to say anything. I know the rules. There are no rules. He turned to face me, the porch light casting a soft glow across his jaw. "Then what are we doing?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know anymore. He stepped closer. Just one step. Enough to smell him. Enough to feel him. "I love you, Diane," he said. And everything stopped. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a quiet, aching, true way. The kind of moment where life turns and nothing looks the same afterward. I opened my mouth. Closed it. I couldn't say it back. Not because I didn't feel it, but because saying it meant choosing. And I wasn't ready to choose. Instead, I whispered, "This isn't sustainable." "No," he agreed. "But it's real."
And it was.
God help me, it was. We didn't kiss that night. Didn't touch. But something between us had shifted. The game was no longer about sex or even escape. It had become about truth. And the truth was unraveling faster than I could keep up. After that night, the texts changed. They slowed. Grew shorter. Less playful. Aaron started pulling away, not out of punishment, but out of self-preservation. And part of me respected him for it. The other part panicked. Because I knew what I stood to lose. I tried to act normal. I threw myself into decorating for Christmas. I volunteered at the church bazaar. I said yes to things I didn't want to do. But none of it touched the hollow ache I carried. And then, in the quiet days between Christmas and New Year's, I found myself driving. No plan.
No pakbat.
Just keys in hand and heart in my throat. I ended up outside Aaron's apartment. I knocked. He opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair damp from the shower. His eyes widened when he saw me. Diane. I couldn't stay away, I said. I don't have answers. I don't know what happens next. But I know I can't pretend you didn't happen to me. He stepped back. Let me in. That night, we didn't have sex. We held each other.
We talked.
I told him everything. About the emptiness I'd hidden for years. About the version of myself I thought had died after 40. I told him how afraid I was to destroy what I'd built, and how afraid I was to stay inside it. He listened. He didn't offer solutions. He just held me like I was something worth holding. The next morning, I left before sunrise. I returned home to a quiet house, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Walter came down in his robe, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You're up early." I couldn't sleep. He poured his coffee, sat across from me, looked me in the eye, and said, softly, "Are you in love with someone else?" The question landed like a blow, not because I didn't expect it, but because it was asked with such calm, such acceptance. I didn't lie. I couldn't. I nodded. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, there were tears.
He didn't yell.
He didn't leave. He didn't accuse. He just asked, "Is there still anything here worth saving?" And I said, "I don't know." We talked for hours, more than we had in years, about loneliness, about routine, about how easy it is to drift apart when no one wants to rock the boat. He told me he loved me, that he always had, that maybe he stopped seeing me, but never stopped needing me. And I cried, because it was true, and not enough. In the weeks that followed, we agreed to separate.
Gently.
Respectfully. Not with anger, but with the kind of grief that only long marriages know. The grief of still caring, and still knowing it's not right anymore. We told the girls together. We sold the house slowly. And one day, months later, I stood on a different porch, Aaron's, with a bag in hand and a heart full of hesitation. "I'm not here to be rescued," I said. "Good," he replied. "I'm not in the business of rescuing. I'm just here to see you."
To know you.
And he did.
He does.
It's not perfect. Nothing ever is. But it's real. And for the first time in decades, I feel like a woman who has chosen her life, not defaulted into it. And that, I think, is its own kind of salvation.